Okay, so we're back, a new episode here. We're at episode 25. We've been a quarter of 100. Can you believe it?
Is that right?
That's right.
We really probably should have had more episodes.
Yeah.
But you know what? Life happens and it gets busy. Mm-hmm. Like we had every intention of shooting another one last Thursday, but we're in Amarillo, Texas, and we actually got a lot of snow. The weather was pretty bad, and it was just like, meh. You know, that's the good thing about it being ours is that we can decide that the weather, it's just not suitable at this time.
Right. Yeah. And I feel like there's not just the weather, but, virtually everything else also slows down over the holiday, at least for a few minutes, if you're not traveling. Only if you're not traveling. Right. If you're traveling, especially with kids, you're just running around the whole time.
You need a vacation to have a vacation.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, for sure. So during this episode, one of the things that we want to cover, first of all, we're going to have to use one of our things where we have Tanner evenly speaking audio, so that he's, even if he's off screen, I think it would be a good thing to be able to have his input, have him in introduction. Yeah,
sure.
But today we're going to talk a little bit about artificial intelligence, AI, and how at our ACES conference this year. We had someone that came in from Silicon Valley who talked about, the imperative basically of partnering with AI and how it was going to change the dynamic of and potential, I guess, for human, not just relationships with its technology, but human relationship with science and everything
Education,
else. Right.
Everything else. Yes.
Expanding and broadening human perspectives, human experience. Mm-hmm. What do you think?
I really thought one of the things that he said was very interesting was, right now, of course, he said, if you're over the age of 35, you feel like AI is coming for your job. AI is going to take over. And I think I've said it multiple times. I actually think I said it on one of our podcasts that, I feel like, the robots are going to take over. And right. Have you not seen Terminator? I think that's exactly what I said. But as I was listening to him, I was like, you know what? He's right. Because, when the typewriter came out, right, everybody was like, oh, no one's going to know how to write. It's going to run everything. Education is over. But it didn't. It actually enhanced it. And then the computer, right? Again, the computer takes a lot of the mundane things that we were doing, and it's now doing for you, right? But it's not like we've lost other things. It's just that some of the things that we're not doing as much anymore have now become a more enhanced type of thing, like right. Art. I think that was really cool what they brought up is right. Some of the art teachers were really, really worried about the idea of using AI as a tool for art. Right. And he was like, well, that doesn't, I get it and I understand. He said, but that's the thing is like, you will have to say this is AI generated art versus human generated art, which then if that's what we're moving to, then we'll just have like a better appreciation, a bigger appreciation for human generated art compared to AI. And it's not necessarily going to get rid of things. It's just going to make things different. Right. It's now becoming a tool. And I was like, okay, maybe I was overacting just a little bit to robots are taking over and Terminator's happening.
Right. Yeah. So one of the things that I love about Terminator, and that's singing one of my verses.
Yeah.
Terminator, has this whole time travel thing component to it as well. And you go back, but really what you're going back to is both the period where Terminators haven't taken over, and I guess the machines haven't taken over yet. We're at that place where it's like the rise of the machines.
Sure.
And I'm trying to remember the name of the company, Dyna something, Teledyne, I think maybe. They're like a defense company, I believe, that ends up putting AI in charge of their
nuclear chip,
their nuclear weapons systems and whatnot. And of course, there's a lot of anticipation and kind of anxiety, I think, not just among like ordinary people, but among the highest levels of decision makers. Also, if you listen to them talk, one of the things that they bring up, and of course this is very common, I think, in Terminator, is they always want a human to be in the loop of the decision-making process. There are other countries out there that aren't doing that. They don't necessarily think that it's important for a human. What they think is the most important thing is to be fast. Of course, that's how mistakes get get made. And of course, I mean, it is important to be fast.
Sure.
It's important to have, but America thinks that the individual does matter, and the individual has dignity and deserves respect. And of course, what that means in the context of AI is that human beings are going to still have a decision to make in that loop. Although there will be things that get taken out of our hands. And I mean, with our conversation at the ACES conference, he was talking about a lot of different sectors of the economy that are going to be affected and impacted. One of the interesting things that I took out of that was the question from the about welding. Like where would something like this fit into welding? And he mentioned the idea of having a lens and a camera on the helmet that welders wear, and being able to identify and spot maybe potential weaknesses as it's happening, so that you don't have to find it out later. And so it's just there providing information to help you do a better job.
Yeah. And that's the thing that I really enjoyed was that he did say, we're going to use it as a tool. It's not going to take over. And that's the, big thing. That's what everybody's worried about is that, it's going to take over. It's taking all these jobs and doing these things, but it's not really taking it away from you. It's just making it more effective. And the thing that he brought up that I thought was really interesting was that they made an AI machine I don't even know, a robot, I guess, that played chess against the best chess player in the whole world. And it beat him. And, he was very angry about it. But then they showed him again and he said, you know what, this is great. They have the ability to do the things that humans can do. But what he even brought even to more was that it's not that it's going to take us over, but we are actually better. We're even better with that tool. If we can have AI help us, then we can beat anybody else. Right. And so the most effective one was not the AI by itself. It was AI plus a human that became the most effective out of everything. And I think that was huge. Right. And then at that point, I was like, okay, so what does that mean for us? Right? With psychology, with government.
Sure.
Right? These are a lot of these topics we feel like, where do we fit in? If AI is going to have the ability to talk about this, to lecture, to teach on it, they're going to be able to do things that, they can have somebody write the paper and cite different things and research all of the psychology research in an instant, because that's what AI can do. Are we losing our grip on, are we going to be able to teach? Are we going to lose the idea of that human interaction? Right.
And I think that our conversation in the last episode had to do with, we were talking about sociopathy.
Yes.
And I would like to be able to talk about that a little bit more because it seems like I think I was reading an article about the way that these systems are being designed. And of course, they want to make them as responsive to human emotion as possible. So they're making machines pretend to be, caring and to have emotions. Isn't that kind of the whole definition of soci? And in that, I mean, it literally cannot feel what other people are dealing with.
Absolutely.
So, I mean, we wouldn't look at another human being and go, oh well, they have all the strengths and none of the weaknesses.
Right.
Right. I mean, that's the way we look at this. It's not the same thing, and of course, that's not a direct analogy. It's a false equivalency. But I mean, I think it's relative to our conversation. It's important because it kind of makes you a little bit less trustworthy, little trustworthy.
Right. Like the idea here is like we do, like anybody who has any of the possible personality disorders, a lot of times it is that the fact that they don't understand, they don't have the emotion, and they can't understand how somebody else does. So even with the therapy that would be done for those types of individuals, it would be teaching them how to have the emotion, teaching them when they should respond in a certain way, which that's what we would have to do with robots and AI, is teaching them how to do that. So it's almost like the response is robotic. And that's kind of what we do see with people who have those personality disorders. It's like the intended response. Like that's what you should do. And but that's not usually, even though we think that this certain response should be what a human does. It's not necessarily what the human will do, because we actually do feel and have those emotions. So it's a lot harder than we would think to program a more, visceral response, a more like realistic response from a computer or a robot, because there's a lot of situations that maybe humans that are doing it haven't experienced yet.
Right.
And so it's hard to program that on something that is supposed to feel a certain way in a situation, but maybe ourselves, we don't know how we would feel in the situation.
And you mentioned a second ago, losing your handle or your grip on reality, specifically if you're a human being and you're having to really depend on, of course, we've always been a little bit dependent on technology, not just today, like with phones and schedules and things like that, but any type of technology, whether it's a stick or a bone or whatever it is that you're using to make a fire or kill an animal.
Sure.
I think that there's a certain level of dependence that comes along with any technology. But at the same time, this seems special, and I'm trying to figure out and articulate why it's special. I'm not the only one. I think everybody's at this really profound moment trying to figure it out last 20, 30 years. Of course, Terminator is helping us do that, right? There's all kinds of other movies. What is that? iRobot?
Yes.
Which is, built around the idea that, in the beginning, these are basically a perfect example of rules around a program or whatever, that there's not a lot of human being. It's simulating human emotion, but it isn't the same as human emotion. But then that being taken to the nth, where that person, that machine is other, but eventually, even in our common law system, like one of the issues or the questions is, especially as it gains in the property itself, gains in value, and the industries change to utilize it's going to get to where, eventually, I think hypothetically, that the robots will have rights, right? That's kind of what iRobot's about, is that there's a certain level of dignity that comes in any type of intervention on behalf of someone else. Right. So even if it's a machine, that's a fascinating story. The guy, Isaac Asimov, was way ahead of his time, right?
Yeah. And that's kind of idea. It's like, why we talk about this in class. Actually, we were just talking about it. It's like the whole ethics of doing research on animals. And why is it okay? Well, it's because humans they're humans, right? And what makes them more human? The fact that we have more of a consciousness. We have a higher level of thinking. We have more emotion. Okay, well, but if we develop robots and AI to, simulate or have these types of, motions and learning, right? Would they not be more humans? Therefore, we would not be able to do the same kind of research. We can't just destroy them, because now, technically, they do have some sort of consciousness in a way, because they're learning, and they do have the ability to communicate. And that's one of the biggest things, is we decide that animals don't necessarily have the same kind of consciousness. And the only reason we do that is because they can't tell us. Now, if a robot could tell us, now does that mean that they actually do, or have they just been programmed to say these things?
Right.
And that's, it becomes a whole new thing.
Totally. Yeah, no, totally. And it makes you wonder about a lot of things, honestly. And, but it'll have to bear itself out over a long period of time. And that's comforting. The fact that the legal system that we have in place specifically will allow human experience to inform that conversation, and that it cannot really exist outside of a human interaction, at least not yet. When it has the capability to do that, or these multiple systems have the capability of interacting on behalf of human beings, that changes the dynamic too. I think that he mentioned there that that's happening on Wall Street.
Yes.
Right now, right?
Right. When you think of Wall Street, the fun yelling and screaming and loud and sell, and people jumping. Yeah. Right. He said that that's not the way it is anymore. He said you go in there and all you hear is a of the machines running, because now it is. Like those types of things of stock market and whatnot, they're so complex, but an AI system can run it that quick. Where a human, it does take time, but it's like you miss the the interaction, the excitement, but at the same time, do we need it? And we do, I guess my thing is, we're always worried about making sure that we're doing what's best for humans. And truthfully, we did know that stock market often did bring high anxiety and possible depression and different things because of
definitely. Oh, I mean, they've done a lot of studies on that.
And because it's a very intense kind of situation, and it can be, very warning very quickly, but it also can be very damaging very quickly. So, if they, put AI into that and kind of eliminate the, destructive part for the individual, the human, then, I guess it is good for society. But then it's almost like, well, but okay, so what else? Like driving, right? That's going to be. I 100% think that sooner than later, I know we have vehicles that drive themselves, but it's almost like an option. I think that it's going to now be the norm where they are going to. It's going to be more like all the movies we see in the future, where you have different tracks and you get on. You can have your own individual that goes to your house. So it's kind of like a subway, but an individual for you. You get in your car, but you don't drive anymore.
Right.
It goes for you. And I think that's going to be the norm because technically, we see so many accidents in cars. And if that is something that we're trying to get rid of, then that should be.
Right. And insurers are kind of the people driving that conversation, which is, again, the property ownership is kind of driving the conversation about whether or not it should be an intervention to begin with. Like another example of that is currently the wildfires that are going on in California. So last night I was reading a story, I think it was 21% contained at that time. Been going on, I think, since January the 7th. Yeah. There's a lot of different theories out there about as to what started all of this and why it took a little while to be able to respond to it. But one thing that people aren't talking about, I think, is one of the implications, right? Let's say that, for example, that on January the 7th, they were slow to respond because there were multiple, people were doing other things. So maybe the, I know it's not supposed to do this, but maybe the operator line or the dispatcher line was busy. Sure. And I've heard that that's not supposed to happen, right? But I'm sure that it does sometimes.
It would have to.
Yeah, that the first person that identified what was going on had identified it at an early time, but it didn't get responded to for a long time. Now, that's not the first responder's fault. That's a human, the finite. We can't do everything all at once. So we're not, although it would be kind of fun sometimes to have like 8 arms
I always
or something.
Say that.
I don't know how in the world an octopus can do things like that. But the fact here is that it took a long time because humans were in the loop. So if you were to take some type of a machine, right, and have it learn how to respond to things like that, and specifically how to be able to deal with the physical threat of the fire at an early time, create an early warning system so that people know that there's a fire and that it's tracking their movements in real time using their GPS, their Tesla vehicles or their Tesla trucks or whatever it is, their phone. Yep, they are able to intervene in whatever is happening inside that vehicle or on the phone and say, just like we do with an Amber Alert, hey, whatever you do, don't go that direction. You need to turn off here and exit here and figure out how and that creates its own problems. But it's an interesting way of thinking about how it could play a role in future wildfires, specifically in a place like Los Angeles, where it's like really there's a lot of population density and a lot of potential for people not understanding or not hearing in time, whether or not they knew, again, early warning, but also in the response. So I think there were some of these water lines that my understanding is they didn't have either enough water or they didn't have enough to put out the fire, right?
Yeah.
So what if they were to take, again, a machine, and I'm sure that there's surveillance down on the ground, like beneath the surface, monitoring where water is and where it isn't, surely. If you were to take a system, though, and have it connected to the early warning system and the phone calls, it's able to monitor the situation and do all these things, maybe you wouldn't have as much loss of life in big catastrophic events like this.
Sure. And that's as you're talking, what it sounds like to me is the idea of bureaucracy, right? We talk about, there's too much red tape. Okay, but at the same time, we do want to still have that human interaction. We still want to have that human part. But if we could get rid of it, wouldn't it deal with issues a lot quicker?
Right.
And but at the same time, do we really want to just release all of our, the handle on anything?
Right.
Like AI, now, you got it all, but it's like, wait a minute.
People become less, they're not able to, what if we lose the ability to have specialized firefighting because it's being
handled,
being outsourced to AI or cybersecurity, any type of situation where
and it would
relying.
Be right. Would it be faster? Technically,
would it save
theoretically,
lives? Right? And again, insurers here in the fire incident here in California, that's one of the major places a lot of folks are talking about, and specifically around whether it's the more conspiracy side of that stuff out there, and that's its own conversation,
which we'll talk about.
We should, yeah. Absolutely. But or it's the more real property loss statement of like, hey, this person was it was a sense of arson, or it was not just a widely planned conspiratorial thing, but rather just one or two criminals maybe not even acting in concert, you know, or if it was just an electrical fire. But the consequences of that are tremendous. So if it's an electrical fire, right, the insurers are going to dictate the rules of that game, kind of like playing. It's okay. It's just that's kind of the nature of what happens there.
Yeah. And it is. It's kind of that's a scary thing to think about.
Yeah.
But it is. That's where it is.
But that's where all the accountability is built into those insurance systems.
Yeah.
So if you think about how much risk, what's the word? Risk mitigation factors, I guess, and risk
management. Any of the
the amount of thinking that goes behind. Okay, if this driver, given their past record and their current record and their future, all the things that we predict about them, were to get behind the wheel of this vehicle that doesn't have power steering or whatever, we're going to put together their premium based on a calculation that we've done statistically that kind of finds what what we think that the probability that they might get into a car accident and have to make a claim at yada 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 time. Okay, so that is kind of that's kind of calculated. Making it in a calculated way, making us it's already a thought out process. That's what I'm trying to say. So people don't have to think about it in the moment, because that's the last thing you want to have to think about in the moment. Is how much
should we help them?
Yeah, how much? But that's it's a really interesting problem.
But it doesn't seem like it would be just on this basis, but it is.
Right.
Sure. Yeah. I know. Well, again, with this high, so when we do it as humans, do we have any, human error? And the answer is yes, because that's why it's called human error.
Right.
So, but if we had the machines do everything through AI, would it be more successful? Would it be more accurate? But again, every time that we talk about anything that has to do with AI, we have to remember that humans are the ones who are usually developing in the first place. So is it possible that we have human error in the development of AI?
Sure.
And again, yes, because it's human error. And, then that's where those laws come in. Like, do we need to make sure that we don't give them too much power? We don't give them full autonomy to take care of everything, because we still do want to have some sort of human aspect still involved with it, because a lot of times they don't know the emotion. They don't know, the specific perception and experience and everything else that a human would be going through compared to a robot, and the statistics and the probabilities and everything that goes into it.
Right. And there are a lot of people that are just anxious about it.
Yeah.
I'm a naturally anxious person. Yeah. And I was just going to bring this up, that the anxiety that goes into, losing your grip on whatever is, the focus of focus of an entire industry or multiple industries at once going towards, it's a competition.
Sure.
And a competition is like a conversation. That's something about American government, first of all, that I love. Absolutely love the fact that whether you're it's so helpful to think about government and politics as a conversation. That it's, sometimes we go far to the right, sometimes we go far to the left. But you kind of got to go there to be able to have the experience, what the best route is. And we're wanting to make sure that we make the sharpest points, the best products. And the only way to do that is to have a conversation about it. Yeah. Have a long conversation about it. So, in that sense, American democracy is a conversation. And we were talking, I think, in this last episode about whether or not it needed to be a polite conversation. It doesn't have to be a polite conversation. No. It's not anybody's civic duty to be polite. It is our duty, though, to be active listeners.
Right.
I think. But if we don't, we're still going to learn the lesson. It just might take 30 years longer.
Sure. And I think that's one of we talk about in my class all the time is like, you have to understand that there's always going to be somebody with a different point of view. And we're not here to say that one person's right or wrong. What we're here to do is to learn to listen so that we can actually critically think about the topic in multiple different perspectives and look at it different ways instead of just saying that my way is the right way and that's it. And that I personally think that just shows that there's no growth there, right? And we want to critically think. And this is why I think that with this introduction of AI and that the speaker who came in, I came in 100%, nope, never use it. I'm not using it in my class. It's going to take over my job. It's going to, all they're going to do now is instead of having colleges and paying professors, they're just going to get a system and set up AI for each of it. And because there's now AIs that will talk and they sound very much like normal people. And I was like, nope, there's no way. I'm not buying into it. I'm not going to let it take over my job. And then as I listened to a different point of view, I understood. I was like, okay, so I'm a lot like the people from the past that were like, computers are going to take over everything. And the truth is it hasn't. They still need us. They still need people so that the computer, the tool, can be more effective. And that was I think that just brings about this whole idea of, you have to be open. You have to be able to think. You have to be able to listen to multiple sides so that you can make the most informed decision.
Right. No, I think that's exactly right on. Yeah. In the past, also with some of the some different technologies, slow adapters of them end up on the losing end of the longer term competition. So, in the Civil War, for example, one of the biggest, the big factors, for the North was the ability to use the telegraph so much because it's they're able to stay more informed and therefore plan ahead for possible catastrophe. It still takes a long time, and of course you have to still have the right leadership, human leadership, in control. But when you look at movies like The Matrix, though, why do they do need humans? The Matrix, they don't say that. It's not like Terminator, where the outcome is we should kill all the human beings.
Yeah.
In The Matrix, they need the human beings because the human beings are the people that feed them. They're literally energy. They basically turn human beings into batteries.
Yeah.
And that's pretty dark.
It is.
So they still need us to energize them. That's it. So they kind of keep us on almost as a slave population. Have you ever seen WALL-E?
Yeah, of course. Yes.
Okay. Yeah. WALL-E. So this is the first year I think that last year was the first year I've seen WALL-E.
Oh, okay.
Can you believe that? I've certainly seen images of WALL-E, but I'm too old to have paid attention when it came out. But now I understand that what they're, in the movie, the controversy around the movie was what happened to the human species, and that they're all up in space, and not coming back home necessarily. Really, reality is the people that had made promises to come back home had all either forgotten or
too hard of a work,
given up on trying to take care of and be good stewards to the planet and to each other. And so everybody is overweight, unhealthy,
can't barely walk.
Obsessed, watching TV screens all the time, not really
Not
paying
interacting.
attention, not paying attention to each other.
Yeah.
And so all of those qualities, I guess, specific to that movie, and in combination, I guess, with The Matrix and some other fun movies that are not necessarily dark, but WALL-E is a love story.
Yeah.
And it's a fun one at that. But I mean, I'm just curious, like that in both instances, though, you mean kind of different versions of slavery, where the outcome is, you've got all this technology. What do you do with it?
Right.
And how do you be productive with it? Maybe this is a way to be more productive, and it allows, for example, bringing back the example of the wildfires in California. Maybe it also allows the police, the firefighters, the city to be more human in their approaches to everything else, because really a lot of the stuff that we're dealing with responding and having different type of course, we're still needing humans here, but it does maybe provide a little bit extra time.
Yeah.
I don't know, or is that wrong?
No, I mean, it sounds like that's what we need. It seems like that's, there's only so much, like you say, there's only so much we can do. So if we can have a tool that makes us more effective, why wouldn't we use it?
Right.
Like if you have a fork at dinner, and why wouldn't you use it?
Right.
But that's this kind of ideas. If AI is going to make it better, then we should use it instead of being like, nope, I'm not using it because it's new and it may take over. And the truth is that's going to be the step. It's like we can't continue to pretend it's not going to happen.
Right.
We're going to have to step up, learn how to use it, make it a tool, which then makes us better.
Right. It's going to be a long conversation.
Yeah, it is.
It's like, I mean, it's kind of fun though.
It is.
I mean, frankly, I'm kind of curious. I've always wanted to go into outer space. I think that would be very much fun in real life, but it sure would be. We've talked about that before.
I wanted to be an astronaut.
Yeah, that's right.
I went to space camp and everything.
That is so cool, by the way. Was that in the one in Alabama?
No, it was in Houston.
Houston. Yeah. Okay, cool.
And it was great. And I was like, I definitely want to be an astronaut.
Do you remember that movie from the 1980s,
yes,
Space Camp?
And I'm pretty sure that's why I ended up going.
That's a cool movie.
Yeah.
They actually blast off accidentally.
Yeah, it wasn't like that. It wasn't that cool.
It wasn't.
It was cool, but it wasn't that cool. We didn't engage in as many activities as they did. Like the G-force, we got to feel some of it, but not what you would actually feel in a space shuttle.
Right.
We did it was kind of like a simulated moonwalk underwater with some weighted boots, but that was really it wasn't as cool as Space Camp. Space Camp the movie was pretty awesome.
Right. Yeah. I mean, that's right up my alley too.
Yeah.
Hey, Madeline, whenever you get a chance, could you hit the return button? Yeah. That switches the scene. It's helpful. Has it been? Has it been over there the whole time? Okay, so we've got lots of. Oh, it hasn't.
No, it's been mainly at y'all.
Okay.
But it switched. I don't know what I hit, but it switched to me, and I was like, and then the turning, clicking the left arrow and up arrow stopped working. So I was just going back and forth.
We have been. Okay, so we've got somebody doing scene switches for us in the last episode, I was trying to get more interactive with Beth because it's kind of a lot to take.
Yeah, I couldn't do it.
Scene switches in between. Although I mean it's okay, but I mean we're gonna have to figure out how to do all that stuff and do it really well. I've seen a lot of these, by the way, video feeds or whatever on the podcast that have people sitting on a couch, right? For example, and the guests that they have are on their own screen, and then some people are sitting on a couch. And then of course sometimes they have live guests, but a lot of times the people that they're talking to are in another location.
Yeah.
So they're zooming in, and so it makes it. I don't know. I think that there's a certain level of more ease there because you're not having to do lots of scene switches.
Switching,
we're gonna have to. We'll figure it out. Yeah,
we'll figure it out.
Yeah.
That's what it's all about.
That's exactly right. And I mean, a lot of that stuff is just out of our control to begin with. To go a step further, America was not really we may have had them. We were the most powerful industrial power,
sure.
right? But prior to the attack on Pearl Harbor, right? I mean, that was something that, I mean, when you look back on it and really try to learn the lessons of history, there's a lot of different things that played into that outcome of that attack, that surprise attack. But it was also just part of the way it's always been, which is surprises happen.
Mm-hmm.
But if you think about the outcome of that and how much it changed the alignment of other people's lives, it's almost like who would have ever told the Japanese that was a good idea prior to them bombing if you knew what the outcome was going to be.
Sure.
So, I mean, I think judging, and it could be way worse to not depend on AI if you have humans doing one thing and, other countries doing another.
Yeah.
And there's not necessarily a lot of, it's going to sound weird, but authentic engagement between the machines themselves. How do you know that you're not going to end up trying to preempt the nation? It might be again, a human being that's the one that's choosing to do that.
It's not the machine.
And that's not something that people are talking about. The humans we're pretty violent.
We are.
And so that being in and of itself alone might be a more volatile situation.
It's kind of like the hindsight 2020 bias. Like we say, oh, well, we're not going to go with AI because Terminator. Right. Well, we have no idea that's what's going to happen. I mean, could it? It's a possible outcome, but there's also millions of other possible outcomes that could come from it. Right. And then we, if afterwards we'll say, oh, I told you. But again, you didn't know. There's no way you could have known that was the thing that was going to happen. Just like with them attacking Pearl, we didn't know that they didn't know, but that was going to happen.
Right.
Like they, in their mind, they thought this was the best idea. This was what's going to happen. We talk about the unintended consequences all the time for everything. And that's kind of this idea too, right? We're going to go in with the best intentions of everything with AI, with, teaching our students everything that we're doing, right? We come in with the best intentions, but of course some things happen.
Right.
And sometimes these are the unintended consequences. And that's when we have to back up and try to fix it. And that's kind of where I think we are more often than not in humans, is we go in with the best intentions, we do the action, we do whatever it is, and then we see what happens because of it. And because of that, we stop, we reevaluate, and then we come at it again. I think that's what's really cool about humans, and we can't just expect that if AI does start to become an everyday tool, that it's going to be a bad thing. Right.
It's kind of a preempting of the conversations that people do with some of the more complicated issues that we probably talk about in our classes too. Anyway, like for example, and you mentioned being imperfect is accepting the imperfection of a conversation or whatever. It's what makes it a conversation. It's what makes it it's what makes it a human experience. And so, for example, in the past, let's say we're talking about something like abortion, right?
Mm-hmm.
Something that's a tough, difficult, emotional topic that has a lot of people talking about, like when life begins, and lots of all these philosophical underpinnings, and then the theological dimensions to it. Our past, lives with our families or our whatever is informing our decision making. And that is and this is a lot of overlap between, by the way, your world and my world.
Mm-hmm.
Sociology, I think that the term for that is political socialization. That all the things that are actually informing your mindset or whatever when you're making political decisions.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that that's a really big overlap. Maybe even one of the reasons that we enjoy talking to each other is because all of those things really do matter. And if anything, they're an affirmation. But in a conversation, if that's allowed to be the thing that's in charge, it can really set your arguments back.
Sure. Mm-hmm.
It doesn't really matter regardless of what you're arguing for if you're not looking for the very best.
Yeah.
And you just kind of accept whatever's given.
Right.
And it kind of makes you wonder, though. Some other things. One of the companies that the ACES conference, one of the companies that he worked for, I believe the speaker that is, is a legal company of some sort, like they do AI for legal.
Yeah, I thought that was interesting.
Either I don't know if it's reasoning or if it's what it is, who it is that kind of the clients are for that. But it is it's an interesting. I mean, it's not something that you always think about. I was talking to Frank, Dr. Belizzi, a couple of months ago, and something that he mentioned was the movie Minority Report. Of course, we're always going to talk about movies. I could talk about them all day long because they're such a good, in many ways, not articulator of like reality, but kind of trying to
pieces of reality
show you what is possible or whatever. And of course, Steven Spielberg is great.
Yeah.
But in Minority Report, you've got ubiquitous technology, ubiquitous AI, and really, they've got the precogs, which are really kind of standing for these people with the. Oh, are they really?
Yeah.
Precogs? Oh, yeah, of course. Yes,
psychology.
Of course. Yes. I don't know how I not put that together.
It's called parapsychology, actually.
Okay. Parapsychology. Wow. So it's predictability, predictability.
So if you have the ability within your brain, the cognitive ability to see things happen before they actually do.
So in government, you know what they call that? They don't call it. I mean, I'm sure there's people that call it. But I've got this book right here. Crazy. It's called forecasting.
Yeah.
Super forecasting.
Exactly.
Or, whatever. People that are doing, trying to think about outcomes before they happen. They're not always right.
No. And it's funny that you actually
more often wrong.
Bring that up because today in class we were talking about the brain and how there was a study, and I think it's almost 12 years old now, which is crazy. But they said that serial killers tend to have an enlarged frontal lobe. Okay, now they tend not doesn't mean that every one of them does.
Right.
But we had the discussion because we also were talking about that certain experiences actually expand and enlarge parts of your brain that you use more often. And so is it that they're born with an enlarged frontal lobe, or did it enlarge because of the experience of serial killing? And if it did, if you're, people who have enlarged frontal lobe in the beginning, then it would be like Minority Report. And the fact is, we could measure your brain, and then you have look at the tendency for you to become a serial killer.
Right.
And so,
right.
And that has whole implications, which I don't know if AI would be able to do that.
Sure.
Why would? But because we don't measure people's brains when they're born.
We do when we're trying to, insure them.
Once something's happened.
Well, when we're trying to insure them.
Yeah.
Those people are more likely to predict or to calculate information like that far before or long before any type of. So, if those are the people writing future norms and laws, then your precogs are your insurance companies.
Yeah. That's really kind of cool.
It's kind of a neat. I not thought about it. I don't think until just now. So, but it's just it's a good example. And also, something that about with serial killers. I don't know.
I don't know anything. We definitely go off on tangent. I love that.
Let's talk
serial
about that.
Killers are great.
How could they help though? How could AI help? Identify people like that. It's not by reading thoughts.
No.
Right. That's not
the tendency and behaviors.
Right.
Right. So they would be able to look at they would get all the information that's been gathered of previous serial killers, and then look for those tendencies within trauma and development and behaviors that are happening in other individuals,
right,
to say that this person has this percentage of becoming a serial killer kind of thing.
Yeah, that's man.
Okay, but then again, it doesn't take into account the human sometimes.
Right.
Because even now we talk about percentages like kids who are born in a house that are abused, physically abused, will more than likely be physical abusers. Now, that's not for everybody.
Sure.
I think that there's a lot of things that play into that.
Right.
There are some people who they are born into that, and then they are make sure they don't ever do that. Right. And I think it depends on the individual. And so that's why that part of it would kind of be a scary situation to me, because, the probability doesn't mean that it's gonna happen.
That's the Minority Report.
Yes.
That's exactly what it is. Yeah. it's you don't know for sure that it's been, that it's going to happen until it's happened.
Yeah.
Or it's happening.
Right.
And so, but specific to that though, to what extent is the ability for somebody to try to think about what they're going to need, especially if they're utilizing it all the time, specifically around a serial murderer or whatever, the serial killer. I have no idea how that term, by the way, came to fruition, like the serial killer, like with the killer or not.
It was.
It doesn't have the same. It doesn't have the same ring to say serial murderer.
No, I can't remember what they were going to call him in the beginning. Now, there's a movie called Criminal Minds. It's on not Criminal Minds. Is it called Criminal Minds?
Yeah.
That's the profiler.
Oh, okay.
There's actually Mindhunter. That's what it is. Mindhunter on Netflix, and it really does talk about the beginning of how the profiler with the FBI started off, and the serial killer and the naming of it. And I can't remember exactly what they were going to say they were before, but that's, they came up with it through their research and when they were talking about it. What kind of sounded most correct? I guess.
Right. Yeah. What's going to lead to more documentaries being made? What's more likely to move the needle, I guess. So here's another way of, I think, forecasting, and like way it's already happening right now when people are trying to diet. And things of that nature. I mean, probably, but both of us probably know people that want to live forever. Like they expect to live by the statistics, right? Everything, they only make choices that are informed by data. Yeah. And so, I mean, I get the need for that. Of course, it's never going to stop me from having a burger until I'm dead and gone, because I love hamburgers. And I love French fries too. You got to have the hamburger and the French fry together. Yeah. But I suppose the person that would live by, I need to make sure that I have at least 1/2 cup of strawberries at least once a week. Sure. If I don't have that, then I could die earlier, or I could die sooner, or eventually the statistics suggest that I'm going to develop yada yada yada. Living by that standard, it may not be living at all in some ways.
But then they live
David
longer.
Thoreau. Yeah, of course. Yeah, so you live longer. I get the importance of living a long time, especially with kids and wanting to make sure that you're there for
but if you live things. If you live in statistics, then you're constantly worrying about something, right? Always worrying. And sometimes if you're always worrying and anxious, then you're not in the moment. Right. You're worrying about instead of there. So is it really living?
Right. Yeah, I mean,
your quality of life versus quantity.
And how do we determine that? Like, okay, so like if we were to take somebody who was, let's say, and loves to exercise, that's a great thing. I'm somebody who needs to exercise more. I mean, no question about it. Not just lifting weights. I need to be running, doing all the things that you want to do for long-term prosperity. But what are the indicators of quality of life? Right? In the respect of, I don't know, social science, what are some of the things we look for? Like in sociology, what do people look for?
Oh, it depends. That's the problem, is it's an individual thing. Like when we look at the American values, I guess is what we would be. 10 years ago, the most upheld value of American society or culture was achievement and success. Right. It's not that anymore. Now it's more about material objects and leisure time. And it's complete. And so it just changes. So it changes with culture. It changes with generation. It changes with everyone.
Yeah. So, how many babies people are having, demographics, hope for the future.
Actually, and it just, every individual, I think that, it changes with the way your culture, your values, I think that it changes. And then when somebody has, more kids, or they have more people with a certain value, then it can change what we would see for a whole culture. And it's really interesting how that happens.
Right. And so a second ago with the quality of life indicators being what they are, like the World Bank has however many factors that they look at when they're determining whether or not this country with profile A has a higher quality of life as country B. And it's an international standard. It's a system that was an attempt to have a standard quality of life so that you can raise, I guess, the water for all boats. Okay. Right. I guess they're trying to increase the quality of life for everybody by creating a standard in general, but the creation of a standard creates an image that may not always account for everybody, which can lead to a deterioration in quality of life.
Absolutely.
it's a remarkable thing, specifically around, some of the things that we get to talk about in our classes, whether it's, whether it's a difficult topic like abortion or I guess serial killers. We don't really talk about serial killers in my class. Yeah. I can't really figure out. I know that it's got a very, maybe we would talk about it this is a good context of federalism. Okay. It'd be really interesting to see if I could glimpse the future 50 years from now, where we'll be with, again, how AI changes how we govern. Mm-hmm. And again, like as an example of a response to the wildfire thing, federalism and the way that people respond to, let's say there's a homicide 4 blocks south of I-40, I don't know. And then there's another homicide in Lubbock 3 days later. And there's another homicide in Oklahoma City and another one. And they all have the same types of context clues to them. And it leads people to think that maybe they might be linked in some way. So they're exploring that. You need the resources possibly of the federal government unless the states are communicating effectively and have a tremendous, a good relationship, especially like and
everybody's entering the information they're supposed to.
Right. Yeah. No, that's right. Yeah. And so it only works if people are participating. Yeah. And in some ways, unless there's an actor that's like the federal government involved, at which point you still have to invite them in unless there's some type of a prearranged agreement, with the government, which is really common, but it's not always apparent. Like at the beginning of the pandemic, I don't know that people knew that you had to invite the federal government in to help out with, that the spread of something like that. It's a kind of assumed power that like they can just go wherever they want and do whatever they want. And that's just not true. I think that if we could glimpse the future a little bit of AI, specifically around ideas like what we're talking about with whether it's the
assumption that they're just going to step in.
Or something else like the U.S., something going on in the U.S. and something going on in another country that might be linked in some ways. Of course, materially, it's probably already happening in many ways, like with sharing the information, sharing networks and the trade. Yeah. But certainly with our ability to try to figure out how to keep people safe, if that's the number one, it stays the number one goal and not trying to master something. We're what we're going to do? We're going to create a society with no murders, for example. We're going to create a society where there's no
and that's
suffering.
Kind of where the Minority Report come in.
Right. How much? But what's driving it in Minority Report, which is so human, is that they're trying to stick with their standard. They don't want to have to say we're wrong.
Right.
Like we were wrong about this. They were trying to stick to their story, even though they were clearly not wrong or clearly not right, I should say. And they may have been right. And I think that's something that Tom Cruise, he had right as he gets them to forces them to like change their mind. He's like, no, this person is the person that I had no idea. That's the person that it was. I can't believe that. I'm going to go,
and I would kill him. Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, he said that, in the movie, but I mean, whether or not that would actually, who knows? In real life, I think that was just another, Steven Spielberg twisting the knife, but it's a really fascinating topic. Like, does our desire to have a good outcome, are we driving the data or is the data driving us? Really?
Yeah.
And like that, if you're saying like I have 100% murder-free society, like can't that also make you want to say that even when people who die by murder, that they're not dying because it sounds like a safer society?
Absolutely.
Does that undermine your whole AI system?
Oh. Yeah. And that's the idea. It's like probability. It takes out the human will and the choice. But that's kind of what robots do, right?
Right.
So it's interesting. Yeah. AI is just, I think it's going to be a tool. Just get ready for it.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah. And we love our ACES conference, and we're grateful that we got to go to it. I don't know what the future holds for all of this. It'll be interesting to find out. Yeah. We'll have to talk about it some more. And
we will, because I'm going to start integrating more AI into my class. So I'll let you know how it goes.
Yeah. I've got to figure out how to do that as well. I mean, we do the best we can to keep people from creating everything. I guess we're going to have to get better checks.
Maybe.
I don't know how that's going to work.
I don't either.
Real time.
Yeah.
But everybody, thank you so much for joining us, and we'll see you next time.
Thank you.